Well, hello there, academic advising friends. Welcome to another episode of Adventures in Advising. Matt and I are super excited for the guests we have today, continuing our conversation on AI from multiple perspectives. And so we can get started with who we have today.
Just to kind of give a little bit of an overview, it's like, Ryan and I have talked about AI over the last year, and we've had various episodes about the different perspectives and different ways of thinking about AI. And kind of over the last few months, one of the larger initiatives we've heard about was regarding the California State University system that is leveraging the power of artificial intelligence to create AI-empowered higher ed system that maybe can surpass existing models. And part of that is adopting AI technologies such as ChatGPT to be more accessible to students, faculty, and staff at all their CSU institutions. So it's a delight to have various individuals from the California State University Office of the Chancellor and also from CSU San Bernardino. And maybe to start off our introductions, we'll throw it over to Felix.
Thank you, Matt and Ryan. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Felix Zuniga with the California State University at the Office of the Chancellor. I serve as a campus engagement partner where I work with all of our IT leadership across the system and our system office. And mainly I'm here because I'm a part of the ChatGPT implementation team, which we're doing at the CSU. So it's a large implementation of ChatGPT, over 500,000 faculty and staff in the CSU, and just really happy to be here. Thanks.
All right, Leslie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Leslie Kennedy, and I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Academic Technology Services at the Chancellor's Office in Long Beach, California. And I'm also part of this AI implementation team. I represent the academic affairs side, I guess, for the most part, and I've been around academic technologies for a long time. So it's been a very exciting time, and we look forward to sharing more about that.
Wonderful. Ed?
Yeah, hi, Matt and Ryan. It's so great to be here as well. My name is Ed Clark. I'm the CIO for the California State University System, and I'm looking forward to telling you more about what we're doing.
Right. And how about our friends over at CSUSB? We'll start with Brad.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Brad Owen, Associate Vice President for Faculty Development and Chief Academic Technologies Officer. I am co-chair of our ChatGPT Steering Committee with Gerard, Chief Information Officer.
All right. And last but not least, Gerard.
Hello, I'm Gerard. I currently serve as the Chief Information Officer here at Cal State San Bernardino and overseeing all of the IT portfolio for CSUSB. And as Dr. Owen said, he and I had the pleasure of co-chairing the steering committee. So as we rolled ChatGPT out on our campus for our faculty and staff at the end of March and, to students in the middle of April. So we have been blessed with the committee's advice to help us with this rollout.
Wonderful. So Ryan and I will kind of take turns asking questions. And we thought the first one, maybe we'll throw over to our friends at the Office of the Chancellor to kind of give us the foundation or basis of this. Can you tell us a little bit more about the background, like how this conversation started regarding this initiative?
I'll give it a shot, and I invite Leslie and Felix to jump in. One of the things that we are noticing across higher ed, of course, is different universities are adopting these tools at different times, right? And some, you saw Harvard, some of the elite schools got out there very early, and they said, we're going to roll out these tools to our entire communities early on. So you saw Harvard was out there, Michigan was out there, Florida, others, University of Chicago. And that was a concern for us because, in our system, we also want to make sure that our students have access to these tools, that they're prepared to use them as technology starts to transform industries and fields and all those other things. And so we were investigating, with our industry partners, like who can partner with us to really give us the access we're going to need. And that became even more important because we saw that some of our campuses, I think San Diego State was first to roll out an AI tool for their community in the system. The concern is that some of our campuses have, they're larger, they're better funded. And so they're going out and, creating their own technology environments where some of our smaller schools would not be able to afford to get those tools. And so we couldn't, as a system, just stand by and watch, okay, some students and some faculty are going to have access and some are not, right? That was one of the first things. We're like, how do we ensure that everybody has access to these tools across the system, as opposed to the typical institution by institution adoption you'll see in other parts of the country. Should I pass it on to you, Leslie?
Sure. I think that we were very excited to consider our students' needs and our faculty needs in regards to the use of AI in instruction, but also in the future for our students around the concept of workforce preparation. And we'd also been prompted by our governor's office to see what we were trying to prepare for our in regards to programs for our students in order to make sure that they had some exposure to Gen AI and in their various disciplines, and also be exposed to ethical and responsible use strategies around that, and just really help them be able to compete in the workforce with their learning experiences, in addition to what they were focusing on in their majors. So combination of all these areas, equity, and then also access for the future, in preparation for the future, was part of our reason why we wanted to, we went forward with our strategy that we have right now. I'm not sure if you have anything else to add, Felix?
No, I would say access and equity were the biggest things on my mind. I also just think about the responsibility. Many of us being in tech for as long as we have seen when major shifts happen, like the internet, right? And just social media and big movements that have happened in the past, mobile technology. And I think this is one of those ones that we saw right away as, hey, this is a game changer for education, for every industry really that it touches. And so I feel a personal responsibility to help shepherd that within higher education, because I think we can't afford to be left behind.
I was going to build on Felix's point because, one of the things that I was sharing with our board of trustees is that this time that we're seeing with, AI technologies is very similar, in my opinion, to the early web, right? Where we saw Netscape and Lycos and these kinds of brands that kind of became huge and went. But today, we know the internet has transformed how we do everything. And I'm holding my phone here. We do everything via these phones. It's become invisible to us. It's fundamental to how we conduct everything, from academics to business to personal entertainment. And in my opinion, we're heading down this same path with artificial intelligence. It's going to be baked in eventually to everything we do. And to Felix's point and Leslie's point, we have to help prepare our students for this future that's emerging very rapidly.
Listeners to this podcast have heard Matt and I and other guests talk about the potential of AI. And I hear what y'all are saying about that, but we also live in an economic context, a financial context, and especially for a multi-institution system, the decision to make this sort of capital investment in a technology that, while so much potential influence on the world, we still wonder about its adoption. For a lot of folks, AI is just a thing that makes an interesting picture on their phone. And I'm curious how a system your size, and as individual administrators and campuses are looking at this, how do we effectively address concerns about the financial cost of initiatives like this? I hear student access and I hear equity. I hear the possibility of the significant impact, but that's for many people yet to be proven. So at a time where funding and resources feels tight, a big ticket item like this certainly stands out. And I'm curious about the thought process on that and how best to address those concerns.
I can I can tell you a little bit about the financial picture and the history from the CSU's point of view. There had been a number of meetings with, some of the biggest players in this space, Microsoft, AWS, you name it, with the CSU CIOs. We have 23 different CIOs, and of course me at the Chancellor's office. And we're noticing that these technologies were very expensive. So on average, it was $20 to $30 per person per month, right? And so when you multiply that by, in our case, 500,000 people, that is an impossible amount of money for our kind of system. Yet we were again seeing other universities around the country making this investment, saying, hey, we're going to be the AI, center of the United States, and so on and so forth. And so we kept on negotiating with different partners and trying to find someone who would work with us. I had a conversation with OpenAI at EDUCAUSE in October of last year, and I said, we have 500,000 students. 1 out of every 20 people with a bachelor's degree in the United States graduated from our system, right? Which is it's a huge impact. Yet the price of your product is helping to build a digital divide, right? So there's going to be people that are going to have access to these tools, learn how to use them. They're going to go out and they're going to get a certain kind of job and certain kinds of opportunities that will not be available to our community. But the pricing of the product is so impossible for us to reach. How can we partner to get to a pricing that makes sense for us? So, and then we, at a certain point, it was like $12 per person per month. That's the lowest price they had for their EDU plan. Again, too expensive for us. Where we eventually got that, because this is, public record now, the price that we actually paid in the end was $1.88 per person per month. So it was a price that had never been offered to anyone, any system in the world. And so that's when I brought that back to the Chancellor's office, they were saying, you know what, we're doing all these budget cuts, we're doing those other things, but this is a price point. We need to jump on it. We need to provide this access to our community. It's never been offered to anyone else. We have to take advantage of this and make sure that we provide this to everybody and all the students, faculty, and staff. So that's kind of the background of the negotiations, the conversations. And to OpenAI's credit, I think there was, concern from all parties. Well, like, what about the other people that did pay all those other rates? Well, hopefully by this time next year, they'll see their rates also come down. But the magic for them was we were operating as a system rather than those individual universities. And like I said, where we had gone down, we were already seeing some of our universities cutting their own deals. That's what they weren't interested in. The fact that we're going to affect a whole system is what allowed them to offer this opportunity to us.
Maybe I need to find a CSU program to enroll in then, because I know what I'm paying a month.
Yes, and to your point, that you just made an excellent point. We also could see in the data that many of our staff and faculty and students, the ones that had more money, were able to buy their own plans. And so again, even that equity of some of our community members who couldn't afford it were getting left behind.
Ryan, I'm putting the link to some of our San Bernardino programs in chat. So please have a look at those.
I appreciate it, Brad.
Yeah, and I think, just to maybe augment and add to Ed's point too, right? Having the Chancellor's office and the CSU system stand behind it really helped anchor, right, the need and how we are rolling this out at our campus. I'll give you a little quick stats, right? As we haven't even rolled this out to students for a month, right? It's only been about 3 weeks, and we rolled it out to the faculty and staff at the end of March. Just a quick snapshot, right? We have close to almost 4,000 of our users already using this platform. Before that, we have about 130 users who had already their own account or paid account. Just in the month of April, there's been over 130,000 messages that has been sent through ChatGPT just from one campus, right? This is just San Bernardino. Again, keep in mind, only half of the month of April student have access to. So just to talk about the scale of things and the support that we have received as a system-wide adoption, that allows us to have equitable access for all 18,000 students here, that no one really has to worry about, okay, do I have this tool or not, right? And meaningfully, as and Dr. Owen, feel free to chime in, as we were consulting the campus on our adoption, the message was very clear, right? We can't leave our students behind. Students were very strong advocates to ensure that they have the same access as faculty and staff, also giving us a little bit of a buffer window. We also heard our faculty concerns, right? That they need to be ready. They need to be able to see it just a little bit in advance so that, as they need to finish the rest of the term, how can they redo the curriculum if they need to for next year so that everybody has a little bit of a head start, right? So.
Well, and I guess this is maybe a good segue for Brad and Gerard in terms of you get this initiative coming down to San Bernardino saying, okay, this is system-wide adoption. How from an institution standpoint, how do you go about implementing something like this?
The Chancellor's office left it up to the individual campuses, of which there are 23, to decide on the timeline of the rollout. And we weren't quite sure how to go about that. We decided that we would make it available to faculty and staff just as soon as it was technically possible. And in our case, that turned out to be March 24th. And then we formed this ChatGPT steering committee to help us decide about student access, because we knew already from faculty this was a bit sensitive politically. There were some faculty concerns among faculty leadership, like on the faculty senate, some department chairs, that they didn't want students to have access before faculty could get acclimated to this new tool. But when Gerard and I visited the Associated Students Incorporated board, which are the student leadership, they very strongly and unanimously said, the Office of the Chancellor has paid for this for us as a matter of equity, and we want access to it as soon as possible. So we took that to our steering committee, many of whom were faculty senate officers. And in the course of discussions, we settled on April 14th as a student access date. So 3 weeks after the faculty and staff access date. So that after some of those initial faculty concerns about the suddenness of the access and some concerns about academic integrity, it's been pretty quiet in terms of the acceptance of the access. And the students pointed out to us when we visited the student leadership, we sort of played devil's advocate with them and said, well, faculty are concerned that students will have access to it in the middle of the term when faculty have not made their assignments and assessments AI resistant. And the students said, look, we have been using these tools since fall 2023, I think is when they first came out. We are already using these tools. So it's not like we're going to have sudden access to it. So they put it bluntly, faculty should have thought of this before. And implementing ChatGPT across the CSU is not going to make a huge difference in that way.
And I'll also add, through that consultative process, I think, both faculty and student voices were heard, right? So student, again, being strong advocate that, we have 4,000 students that we're graduating this year, right? We need them to have those firsthand experience prior to their graduation as they look for jobs to indicate that they have some kind of AI, ChatGPT, or some kind of Gen AI experience, right, as they're looking for jobs, because those are skill sets that people are looking for as they're entering the workforce. And I think we also made sure that we had some assurance from faculty, because the faculty senate had gone through and revised the policy against academic integrity, right? So the assurance from their perspective is how and to what extent the faculty want to use that in the course is under the faculty purview, right? So that they can be clear with their specific courses with their students that this is the level of Gen AI work that we would accept. And then there are several faculty members who actually on the side have spoken to us about, we've been dipping our toes in these tools. Here are some methods that you can do in class, right? That can allow students to use, for example, ChatGPT for enhancing their work and not to replace their work, right? So there are some faculty on our campus that have already thought this through, right?
I just wanted to add to some of Gerard's numbers. To date, we have over 75,000 users across the system who have activated, and that's not without all campuses being done yet, right? Like Brad said, every campus gets to decide when that rollout's going to happen. And I think we're close to like 6 million chats already, Gerard, just as a stat for you as a system. And like you said, Bradford, they were using the tools before. When we were talking to OpenAI early on, they were telling us those who use their university accounts to subscribe to the ChatGPT tool specifically was very high, right? So we already knew that there was a lot, and that's not counting the ones that are using their private email addresses, Gmail, or other tools, because we didn't have access to that kind of thing. So it was real important to know that there was already a high usage. We're letting the universities decide for themselves and doing all the support on the back end to help them do that, because other schools had initiatives in progress already, and we don't want to disrupt what that is. So it's up to them to figure out when is the best time for them. And this whole kind of experiment is really to expose them to the tools and to the skill sets around AI, not necessarily one tool over another, because as we know, prompt engineering can travel many different tool sets, and understanding how LLMs work and all of the AI aspects on the back end are transferable between the different tools. But Leslie, I'd love to queue you up to hear about the faculty perspectives that you've heard and some of the things that you're working on from the Chancellor's office. If I could, jump in, Matt, and tee up Leslie for that.
Thank you. Well, so based on the statewide academic senate resolutions, that first one was proposed in 2019, where they wanted to see the system look at AI tools and the implications for instruction and potential impact, et cetera. And then further resolutions over the last few years, we were able to organize, Ed and others at the leadership level were able to organize a system-wide AI committee, which included faculty. So to come together to discuss as I mentioned, the impact and the potentials around Gen AI, especially since Gen AI dropped around 2022, 23. So that was one of our first steps, to include the stakeholders, including faculty, in a discussion around what we can do around teaching and learning, and some of the recommendations that could come out of that have informed us in our implementation of this project. Since then, in the last few weeks, part of our strategy around the AI strategy is to provide educational innovations as opportunities for the faculty and students and staff. And so we released a call for proposals to provide funding for faculty who wanted to explore the various strategies that could possibly be utilized in their disciplines, and in regards to utilizing Gen AI, and then also embedding critical thinking skills and strategies around that, and other types of questions that have been coming up around the use of Gen AI in the instructional environment. So that was released about a month ago, and as of this last week, we closed that call for proposals, and it exceeded our expectations, the number of faculty who applied for grants around this challenge that we're calling it. And so it's indicating to us there's a lot of interest among the faculty across our system. We have about 29,000 faculty. We see right now, we thought we might get about 50 proposals. We got 417, and we have a certain amount of funds that we can spend, and they've exceeded that as well in their requests. So it's going to be competitive. But the point is, the work that they went through to develop the proposal and to share the creative and energetic ways that they would like to incorporate Gen AI to support their students, whether it's with chatbots for tutoring or advising or around instructional strategies as well, what has been amazing. So we're very excited to see that creativity and interest by our faculty. It's just a small group of them, but it just in many ways represents a larger group, and that many of them are collaborating across their departments and across their divisions, and then even across our campuses. Some of them are working with other campuses on these proposals. And the intention there is to, again, to be exploring different ways to utilize and ChatGPT or an AI tool to support the students' success. And that's really the key, is to develop strategies around that, as we've just talked about all the other aspects of it earlier. So that's probably the most recent activity that's happening with our instructional side in regards to potential use of it. So what we're hoping in a year, they have a year to implement, is that we'll see a lot of use cases and a lot of publications coming out of these experiences that will inform the rest of us and help us. And in a year, where will we be? We don't even know with regards to how much things will change. So it's exciting to see some sort of a baseline being created for the most part, and then what we'll be building off of in the future.
Thank you. Leslie catalyzes me to say, which I guess is obvious, and it resonates with what Ed said at the beginning. This is a very powerful technology, and as with the early days of the internet and the World Wide Web, we can't really foresee where it's going. So it's a very exciting and fluid time in how faculty are going to use it. And part of what the dynamic there is, it's more change that the faculty have to cope with. Since the pandemic, on our campus, it's been one big change after another. The pivot to completely being online, then we went to semester system, then we changed learning management system, then the challenges of the budget, where the teaching load changed, and now this. So it's a lot for faculty, and to use this properly, they have to rethink their pedagogy, and that takes some work. Faculty may tend to get a course set up and they teach it more or less the same way, semester in and semester out. But this is to really think about how to use this. They have to, first of all, appreciate its potential and how students may use it in classes, and then think about how to redesign their assignments to take advantage of it so it becomes a productive pedagogical resource and not something that students will use to make shortcuts in their coursework.
Everybody keeps bringing up this other part, which is one of the really interesting survey tools that's been developed recently. Was at San Diego State, they developed an AI survey, and they surveyed faculty and students at, I think 6 of our universities, and even universities outside of the CSU at this point. But over 70% of those students that were surveyed say they believe that AI is going to be crucial to their job, their employment opportunities, and that employers are going to be expecting them to have those skills. And one of the key aspects of our AI strategy in the CSU is this workforce acceleration board. We have an AI workforce acceleration board. And the thought behind it is interesting, because it is that some statistics that might be interesting to you. Over 30 of the top 50 AI firms in the entire world are headquartered in California, as tracked by Forbes. Forbes tracks the top 50 every year. But over 50% of the AI workforce in the United States is international, which is not necessarily bad in itself, but it does lead to a question: who's preparing the workforce for California and the United States? And if you talk to employers, they will say over and over again, yeah, we're expecting your students to graduate and know how to use these tools, because these tools are transforming our industries, our sectors. They need to know these things. So there's kind of a tension between what students think they're supposed to learn, and sometimes what we as academics, how much do we bake that into the classroom? How much are we prepping them for the future? So this Workforce Acceleration Board is an opportunity to bring in the governor's office, these industry partners. We have Google, Microsoft, Amazon, all these big names, and our faculty and our academic leadership. So we have this board that sits there and talks about how can we change how we prepare our students for this uncertain future, as some of you have already pointed out. That, in my mind, and from what I know of, is super unique. There is no other conversation like that happening anywhere. But the CSU has got all of these stakeholders in a room talking about how we will prepare our students as AI transforms industries, fields, academia. So I think that's an important component as well.
Definitely sounds like y'all are taking a comprehensive approach in this very early and fast-moving process. But as someone whose primary role with my institution has always been in a staff capacity, I'm curious how y'all are ensuring that not only faculty and student points of view are being heard and utilized, but also making sure that staff who work in especially student-facing capacities are prepared to not only use the tool themselves where it's appropriate and they see the benefit, but also to address this new influx, if nothing else, a conversational current around AI.
Maybe I'll jump in really quickly. So there are many strategies that are happening on campuses, but also at the CO, we've been able to adopt a course that Fresno State created for higher ed professionals, and it's a 4-week facilitated course. We've already waitlisted within 2 weeks of posting that course, and we're now adding more sections. So that is an introduction to AI from the staffing perspective, from the workforce perspective, and so that's quite popular. And so that is one strategy we have. I know our IT group has been running webinars on and bringing in OpenAI to provide very comprehensive overviews as to how to use the tool effectively. And then we have on our site, we have a website called genai.calstate.edu. It's we're calling it the hub. And there are other courses that are available there around prompt engineering or what large language models are doing, et cetera. And there's a whole section on acceptable and responsible use as well within the CSU, and recommendations for various areas of whether you're student, staff, or faculty. But there's a lot of resources there being offered by our industry partners as well. So we're trying to provide as many resources for all types of learners who have this much time, a very little bit of time, or a little bit more time to get to know the topics that you mentioned, Ryan. I don't know, anybody else here might have some more interesting information around that.
Well, I think to your point, Leslie, I mean, the third component, we've actually talked about each of the components. We talked about, hey, one component was access and equity for our entire community. 2 was this workforce acceleration board, right? And then 3 is all about, like, how do we become more effective as a system? In other words, our staff, how do we empower them with these tools to have even more impact than they have today? Whether they're an advisor or a facilities worker or whatever it is, being able to know how to use these tools, have access to them, and expand their impact is the third component of our strategy.
I'll just weigh in on student support and student use of ChatGPT. I think typically we let faculty take the lead on pedagogy, of course, on instruction and how information is going to roll out and the whole learning experience. But in this case, I don't think we can wait for our faculty as a whole to figure out the best uses of ChatGPT. And there's a real opportunity and a bit of a void right now to help our students learn the most productive uses of it ahead of our faculty getting on top of it in terms of pedagogy. And I know on our campus we're not there yet. We need to do more work on student preparation, student professional development, if you will, in using ChatGPT, both in the context of their academic careers and for uses later on.
Yeah, I'll also speak on behalf of the range, right? You can, if you let students loose, they can either come up with something really, really fantastic and great, or they could use it very, incorrectly, right? So I think, it does take a lot of that effort, as a campus, right, to guide them about, what's the best use case? How can you use it in a professional career as well as for learning and teaching? I have a scheduled meeting with one of our computer science club, which we typically sponsor a hackathon every year for them. They're planning on doing one in June later on this year, about the possibility of letting them run wild with the tool, right, to solve a campus problem or solve a industry problem with something that now we have placed in their hands, and see what they come up with, right? So there's kind of that broad range of spectrum with a university can support, our next generation of workforce and students on how to best leverage these tools in both an academic or professional setting versus just research and development. Just play with it and see what you come up with, right?
I'd like to add that in addition, our team runs the annual tech conference that we used to get together and talk about technical things all the time. But due to travel restrictions and budgets, we're not getting together in person. But last year we made the decision to create what we call AI in July. So it's like a month-long tech conference. And this year is the second year. And I'm very proud to say we have like almost programming that's going to fill the whole month of July. Some things very practical, other things very high level, but everything's around AI, higher education, the workforce, everything that we're talking about today, bringing up some speakers to talk about, what does AI mean for the future, the ethics behind it. One of the things that I feel personally is like, if we're going to change and challenge those perceptions that people have against the negative aspects of AI, what better way to do that than to empower, the largest, most diverse set of students that we have in the United States within the CSU to be those change makers and do those kinds of things. So I would say I'll put a plug in AI in July. There's a lot of programming that's going to be available, a lot of great speakers, a lot of panels, and we're just tapping into all those different aspects and really throwing a focus in on that.
Yeah, I think what's also helped, at least from my end, being at CSUSB, is Brad and Gerard, you had a kind of, I guess you would say, a town hall Zoom with students, faculty, and staff, and you both had mentioned like a Canvas course that was offered for faculty and staff. So I actually signed up for that, and I'm going through week 5 or 6 right now of a 7-week, and it's been eye-opening for me, even though it's more faculty centered. But it's made me kind of rethink like my thoughts on AI. And it's really led to interesting conversations. I mostly meet with students as an academic advisor. So even just to tell them, hey, you actually have this new tool available to you on your student profile that you can have access to, and actually talking about ways to maybe implement AI as like a study partner, study buddy, or ways that they might be able to use it. Has led to really interesting conversations. I do want to ask this, and this is open to anybody. So a couple months ago, CSU, UC, California Community Colleges, and private institutions known as CalCan had a virtual conference sponsored by the Office of the Chancellor. And a couple concerns that came up, and I was wanting to see if you had heard these concerns before, and maybe possible answers to it, has been, well, concern I have will be, will AI replace my job? And also from those regarding climate change have commented about like how much energy consumption is used by utilizing AI. Any way to address a couple of those concerns?
Sure. I think these are actually very common concerns. They've come up with almost every presentation I've had. And I think that, the title of our AI strategy it's intentionally titled the AI Empowered CSU. And the reason why we chose empowered is it emphasizes the importance of humans in the middle. We believe humans are key to the CSU and our mission, and we're about enabling human success, right? And so we want AI to help expand, increase the impact that our staff, we have the largest system in the country. And, if you can impact 100 students today, can you impact 200 students tomorrow? These are things that we would think about. How do we expand the impact and the effectiveness of the work our staff does? So, and of course, I run an IT shop, so everybody that works in my shop is a staff person, right? So that's all part of it as well. And I would say that, I think that the other part about sustainability is such a good question. It is actually important. I think there's 2 parts of my answer, and I'm eager to hear what other folks say about this too. One is we've had people come in with criticism. Well, AI has misinformation. It has bias. It has sustainability issues. And in my mind, as this is being adopted faster than any other technology has ever been adopted, that's what's happening right now. We need to have the critics out there and participate. We need you to participate. Say, yeah, we're concerned about bias. We're concerned about these things. How are we going to address it? Because we have to shape this technology for our mission, for our students, for our communities. If you don't participate, it's sort of like complaining about an election where you didn't vote, right? So participate, be part of it, help us shape the future. That's what we're asking the whole community to jump in on. On the sustainability question, there's two parts of the answer that I think are important. One is we do have, and at the AI Commons that Leslie's team created, some very, grounding courses. There's a micro credential you can get. One of it is sort of responsible usage. You don't have to use the top model for every time. So it'll default to like whatever ChatGPT's latest model is. You might be, okay, now it's going to throw 4.5 at me. Do you really need 4.5 to say, hey, how old is Madonna today, right? You're overusing that resource. It's like driving an F1 car to the grocery store to pick up some milk. You wouldn't do that. So that responsible usage, if you use the mini for that, you're hardly using any energy at all, right? And so there are ways that we can mitigate the sustainability issues with AI, and that's something we're trying to spread across the system. The other thing is, the best thing that happened with DeepSeek, remember that Chinese model that came out around December and everybody's like freaking out? What they showed is you didn't have to have all these crazy GPUs. You could get the same effectiveness, very close to the same effectiveness with much less power hungry resources. And so what that also shows is this technology is evolving very quickly. And so those energy demands will decrease over time as part of the technology evolving. Anyways, I said to probably talk too long. I invite others to step in.
I would add that the tools themselves, like OpenAI has acknowledged that, and they're working on, product timeline things like where it's going to help you negotiate which model you should be using to ask that kind of question, right? To help with token usage and that kind of thing. So we're told that that's coming real soon. So I think as these tools are developing, like Ed said, we're helping to influence that. And we have a very frank and open conversation with OpenAI with this implementation and how things are going and what we need to see that's different. And it's really going to impact all of education and how it's rolling out across education, I think.
Absolutely. And just kind of looking at the time, time flies when we're having a good conversation. So this was very enlightening. Thank you so much for joining Ryan and I on this podcast episode to talk about this. So Leslie, Ed, Felix, Brad, Gerard, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.